Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about the newest trailer that came out for Final Fantasy 16. It's labeled as the Dominance trailer. This is the trailer that came out during the most recent State of Play. If you haven't seen it already, I'll include a link to it in the description down below. But obviously giving us a little more insight into the game, a little bit more gameplay mechanics and stuff like that. I'd probably mentioned this previously, but I don't know if I did when the first trailer came out. But I'm definitely getting like a Final Fantasy meets Drakengard. Obviously it's Square-Enix, but still, like, I definitely get with how bloody and kind of the more mature elements is leading into, and well, with how bloody it can be, because typically Final Fantasy doesn't get that bloody. Drakengard set definitely does. So kind of get a little bit of that meets Final Fantasy. I commented on this recently, and I talked about it a little bit previously about the gameplay with the combat and stuff. I think Final Fantasy does this really interesting thing where they take concepts from the previous games and elements from the previous games and they just build upon them. Like you take like the typical turn-based stuff, how they went from like 10 to 12 and then into 13, and then now you go to 15, and it seems like they've built upon that now in 16. I think probably taking elements of like Type 0 and elements of but mainly like FF15, and it does seem like you are a one-off character, very much like a Drakengard situation of it does seem like you're only controlling one character, but it's kind of very much like Noctis where you have like all the abilities. I guess I have never played it, but based on what I do know of it, it's just I never got around to playing it, was FF13 3, A Return of Lightning. Kind of like that game is mainly like you just playing Lightning on our own, so it seems like there's elements of that. Like I said, they do a really good job of just building upon these previous systems they have in their games and such. So it does seem like, I was wondering whether there was going to be a party system or like, you know, because at least even Type 0 had a party system that I was wondering if there's going to be something like that. But from what we've seen before and still now, it does seem like it's just a one-off character thing. But it also seems like your summons act as like power, so like every time you're using a different summon like as like your main focus power, like you're drawing upon that, and it affects like your techniques and what skills you use. Like, oh, like if you have Shiva, you're using like these ice-based skills, or Garuda like more wind-based skills and such. So that seems interesting. And what I think is interesting too is how they're handling the summons, because it feels like they're handling it kind of similarly to, I guess, a combination of like 10, 13, and 15. How like basically in 15 the only person who can summon the summons was Noctis. That was just him being, you know, the prince and the chosen one and everything. But then like in 13, like everyone has, each one of the L'Cie have their own Eidolons that they can summon. So, and especially as we saw that it seems like they're going to be basically kaiju battles in this game between the summons, that it seems like they take a little bit of that, once again, 10 and 13, and no, maybe just 10 and 13, where you summon your summons, where like they stay on the battlefield, but obviously rather than just being like casual battle based, it seems like these are kaiju battle based. The trailer just showcases them fighting each other, so it might be one of those things kind of like 15, where it takes very special conditions to summon them. Obviously a lot of those ended up being story based, but some of them are just very like very character specific and like battle condition based. But I'm curious, like, are you going to find any other like creatures of that level and stuff like that? Because obviously design wise they are picking some designs that are a little, obviously I think closer to the 15 designs, but even more like heavily modified, but using those as kind of a base to kind of build upon to some extent. But once again, just I don't think we've ever seen summons on like such a massive destructive scale. Like outside 15 is where you really like bring in like the havoc of what those summons can do. Like obviously like the way they've always been utilized have always been to a much smaller scale. Like obviously you get into that iffy spot with like 10 because Sin technically counted as summon regardless. So I just thought all those elements just proved themselves to be really interesting. But like going back to the summons themselves too, it seems like they have like, I don't know whether they're implying like each one is like a human counterpart, because you see like, oh, Phoenix, and then you see a little boy, and you see Garuda, and you see the potentially a female character. So it's like, so they have like human counterparts. So that's why I'm wondering, is it going to be a thing of, do you become, like you have the spirit of the summons in you and you become them when you summon them in their gigantic titan kaiju forms? Is it so, or is it more like how it is in 13 where you just summon them because they're bound to you in that regard. I don't know. I'd be curious to really get in depth of like understanding like how that whole system works, but it still is pretty dope in its own right. Obviously, I'm the Final Fantasy fanboy, and so always getting more insight into what they're doing with Final Fantasy. I'm so excited about, but I like the combat. You know, obviously leaning into the once again building upon 15, and once again Final Fantasy Remake 7 just leaning into like kind of that action, because it doesn't seem like it seems like it's more like 15 than it might be 7, but maybe that's my mistake, because it doesn't seem like we have like those menu like necessarily like 15. I mean, not necessarily like RE7, so I think the systems probably lean more towards 15, like that character action atmosphere. Like I think is going to be such a neat element to really lean into combat-wise for those games. And just, you know, I'm always down for a neat fantasy story. Like aesthetically, once again, it kind of reminds me more so probably of like 12. Kind of got that, it's got that medieval look, but once again, it's kind of, well, I mean, a lot of the Final Fantasies like 9 and 12 had that medieval look. But just more and more I see this game, and they're just more and more excited I am. Obviously, these are just some of my thoughts. I'd love to get to know yours in the comments down below. What did you think of the trailer? Are you excited about the game, or you're not excited? Like, what, you know, once again, what is your experience with Final Fantasy? How many of you played? What are your favorites? And how does 16 so far, from what we've seen so far, stack up to your expectations or wants for this game? Just let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.